The clink of porcelain echoed too crisply in the silence of the embassy room. Elara Monroe, Earth's senior cultural attaché, delicately poured tea into two mismatched cups, one floral, one chipped. She smiled at the alien seated across from her, like he was an old friend, not the precision-bred assassin sent to carve out her spinal column. "Jasmine," she said lightly, "though I steep it an extra 30 seconds. Bit rebellious of me, I know." Velcor of the Daxari Shroud Legion said nothing, his seven-limbed form coiled within the uncomfortable steel chair, biological armor shifting slightly with each breath. His central eye blinked vertically. The others, arranged in a perfect arc along his skull ridge, didn't blink at all. They watched everything. "Do you take sugar?" she asked, reaching for a small glass bowl. Right. Your species metabolizes glucose as an explosive compound. My apologies." No response. Velcor's mandibles twitched once, almost imperceptibly. Elara stirred her own cup slowly. Her pinky finger trembled just enough to suggest vulnerability, which was deliberate. She wore a soft yellow dress, out of season for autumn, with a lavender ribbon at the waist. Every part of her ensemble whispered harmless. Every detail lied. Outside, the Earth Embassy hovered above Geneva on anti-grav stabilizers. The city glistened beneath a gauzy sheet of rain clouds, refracted through the high-altitude dome. The Earth Imperial Accord was in full swing. Speeches, toasts, symbolic handshakes. Every other diplomat had cleared out for the next session. She and Velcor remained behind for cultural rapport. He was not here to talk. The ceremonial blade hidden beneath his third thoracic plate could slide between a human's ribs and puncture the heart in 0.38 seconds. She knew this because Earth had dissected 6 of his predecessors. "You must think us strange," she murmured, gently tapping the spoon against her cup. "All this tea and theater. You creatures of conquest, meeting humans with pastries and apologies." Velcor finally moved. His upper limbs rested on the table. Slow, deliberate. A gesture of patience? Threat? "We find humans inefficient," he said. His voice rasped like sand dragged over bone. Soft-bodied, emotionally compromised, curious beyond logic. "You invite weakness." Elara sipped. "You know, I had a cat like that once. Poor thing tried to eat an electric wire. Never did it again." She paused. "Well, tried not to." Velcor's third eye narrowed. He scanned her heartbeat. It was steady. Too steady. His orders were precise. Kill the diplomat. Retrieve the neural matrix. Leave no trace. Earth could not be allowed to escalate. Yet the Empire needed proof of humanity's limits. He was to provoke, to prod, and if necessary, dismantle. He leaned forward. "You know why I'm here." "Of course." Elara set down her cup. "You're here because you think we don't know why you're here." Silence expanded like a shadow between them. Then she leaned forward too. "Let's stop pretending. You're not the first they've sent. Though, I'll grant you're the most elegant." Velcor's hand slid beneath the table. She didn't move. "Do it," she said softly, her voice stripped of warmth. "Strike. Show me the depths of your mercy." His blade hissed free. She lifted the spoon. Not like a weapon, like a teacher holding a pointer. "Your species believes we're incapable of controlled aggression. You think kindness is weakness. That's adorable." He lunged. She stood. In a blink, his limb collapsed under a compact EM burst from her belt. He convulsed midair. She caught him with one hand behind the neck, another at the base of his thorax, and drove him into the floor like she was planting a flag. Porcelain shattered. Velcor gurgled, clawing at the air. She bent down beside him, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "We're not predators because we enjoy killing," she whispered. "We're predators because we enjoy waiting." Then, with an audible click, she triggered the cortical leash embedded behind his primary ocular lobe. The Empire had fitted it as a failsafe in case he defected. Earth had found it 5 minutes after he stepped on the station. He twitched twice, stiffened, and died. She sat back down, smoothed her dress, and resumed sipping her tea. The silence was louder now. A soft chime rang. Courier pickup. Come in, she said, cheerful again. Two humans in diplomat uniforms stepped in with a polished courier crate, a thermally sealed satchel, and a clipboard. Ma'am, the taller one said. Is the package ready? She nodded toward the heap on the floor. Yes. Be a dear and label it properly this time. The last one arrived with organic waste stamped on it. No imagination. The younger officer whistled. That's our third this cycle. Fourth, she corrected gently, if you count the twins from RYL Talk. All right, he said, scribbling. So what's the message this time? Ilara lifted her teacup, held it delicately, and smiled at the empty chair across from her. Something honest. She dipped a note into the envelope, sealed it, and whispered, Please stop sending amateurs. We are running out of shelf space. The crate shut with a hiss. Outside, the rain had stopped. The Earth Embassy shimmered above the clouds like an old lighthouse, waiting for ships that didn't know how lost they were. Back on the Empire's homeworld, a dozen high-ranked strategists would open the courier box, expecting a message of surrender. They'd find a severed head still steaming, a jasmine tea bag resting atop its skull like a crown, and a note with no signature. They would not laugh. The Empire wouldn't stop. Not yet. But tonight, they would whisper. They would wonder. Because beneath Earth's endless politeness, there was something they hadn't calculated for. The discipline of a species that had already imagined every way to kill you, while making you believe it was your idea. There were 3 of them. They arrived on the same diplomatic cruiser, wearing the same red-plated ceremonial robes, stitched with the crest of the Galactic Empire. Unity above chaos, claw-gripping stars. Their movements were too smooth, their silences too synchronized. Earth security scanners read nothing overt. No weapons, no implants, no neurospikes. But the officers at the arrival port noted something quietly. Each one blinked on a different rhythm. Not one among them breathed. Their names, publicly, were Shultir, Lozen, and Murthic. Their species varied. Their purposes did not. Shultir of the Whisperkin, fluid and graceful, possessed vocal cords that could mimic any sound ever heard. Lozen of the Jari conflux had bones that shifted shape, blades born from marrow. Murthic, a Drell hunter from the fog moons, hadn't spoken a word in 30 years. His weapon was stillness. They did not greet the welcome party at the orbital station. Instead, they were led, silently, to Conference Room 14B, a place typically reserved for minor trade treaties and cultural misunderstandings. Today, it had been scrubbed clean. Not a speck of dust. A single long table. A bouquet of earth sunflowers in a dented vase. A bowl of strange yellow snacks sat in the center. Shultir leaned forward. What are these? Cheetos, said General Kaido Lawrence from the far end of the room. He was sipping something hot from a paper cup labeled World's Best Granddad. He wore no armor, no military uniform. Just a cardigan, slacks, and orthopedic shoes. Artificial cheese? Shultir asked, suspicious. Kaido smiled, wrinkles folding like paper maps across his face. You could call it that. Or you could call it humanity's greatest chemical experiment. Murthic remained standing. Lozen sat slowly, flexing his fingers. We were told there would be a briefing. Of course, Kaido said, placing the cup down. Though I imagine you already know what happened to Velcor. The silence was glacial. Then again, he continued, perhaps you're here to avenge him. Or study us. Maybe both. Who can say what 3 assassins are thinking when they walk into a conference room? Careful human, Shultir said, voice calm. We are delegates. And I'm just an old man who likes cheese dust and war crimes. He chuckled. Please eat. None of them touched the bowl. Across the station, hidden sensors mapped their body heat. Monitors logged sweat glands, breath control, blink rate. Murthic had none. Shultir's sweat turned acidic when agitated. Lozen hadn't exhaled in 9 minutes. Earth's systems noted it all. I've always wondered, Kaido said after a moment, picking up a Cheeto and biting with audible crunch, why the Empire sends assassins in odd numbers. Is it a balance thing? 2 to flank, 1 to strike. Shultir narrowed her gaze. You mock us. Not at all. Kaido said warmly. I just appreciate symmetry. You came to kill one of ours. We sent back ahead. You came with 3. That's a lot of postage. Lozen twitched. Schultier stood abruptly. This discussion is a farce. Kaido nodded. Yes, but a courteous one. Then the lights flickered. Not enough to cause alarm. Just a subtle blink, 1 heartbeat long. Barely noticeable, except the bouquet in the center of the table tilted slightly. The sunflowers bent left. Murthic turned his head a fraction. Elsewhere in the station, doors sealed. Kaido leaned back. You're not the first, but you might be the last. In that instant they moved. Schultier released a pulse of ultrasonic interference that would shatter eardrums in a 3-meter radius. Lozen's fingers snapped into serrated daggers. Murthic vanished completely. Kaido didn't move. He simply blinked. Once. Room 14B changed. The floor pulsed. Invisible restraints, designed to suppress hostile biosignatures, activated under each chair. Lozen's legs fused to the metal before he could strike. Schultier's sound pulse rebounded back at her from the walls, calibrated to her exact frequency. Only Murthic escaped. For now, Kaido stood slowly, with the stiffness of age and the calm of someone who'd seen worse. We're not a war species, he said to the gasping, frozen figures. We just remember everything. The walls turned translucent. A dozen humans stood outside, calm, silent, watching. Some held rifles. Others held clipboards. Murthic slipped through the ducts, moving like a ghost. He was headed for the auxiliary escape pod. Earth had made sure there would be one open. Bait needs a door. He dropped silently into the pod bay and froze. She was waiting. Ilaris sat on the floor beside the open pod hatch, sipping from a thermos and reading a book titled Etiquette for Executions, A Human History. Hello again, she said without looking up. Did you find the conference enlightening? Murthic didn't answer. He raised a blade. She didn't rise. Just set the thermos down gently and placed a small round object on the floor. A snow globe. Inside, 3 tiny alien figures seated at a table. Do you know what this is? She asked. He blinked once. A threat, she said softly, but one with good manners. He charged. The globe flashed. Across the station, in conference room 14B, Lozen screamed. Not in pain. In recognition. She triggered a spatial mirror, he hissed. She turned the pod bay into a copy of this room. Schultier shook, bleeding from her inner ears. Kaido watched quietly, then motioned for the security field to drop. The assassins collapsed, breathing, shaking. We're not cruel, he said gently. Just better at pretending we aren't. Outside, Murthic's body dropped from the ceiling vent. He was still alive, unconscious, but in his hand, clutched tight, was the snow globe. Inside it now, a tiny model of Earth. Hours later, the Empire's cruiser departed. A diplomatic protocol crate rested at its center. Inside were 3 sealed stasis chambers. Each held an assassin, alive, restrained, humiliated. There was also a note. Killed? No. We're far more civilized. These are gifts. Return them to your emperor. Ask him to open their minds, if he dares. There's a lesson inside, waiting to be learned. Or unleashed. It wasn't signed, but the stasis chambers were arranged in a triangle, and in the center of them, balanced perfectly, was a single unopened bag of Cheetos. The Emperor of the Galactic Empire was not a man given to fear. He had survived 13 assassination attempts, 7 succession coups, and a midlife spiritual retreat among the Drell Hunters. He had watched entire civilizations erased with the flick of his wrist. But none of that prepared him for the courier package resting on the marble floor of the Grand War Room. 3 stasis chambers, intact, each containing one of the Empire's most efficient, most adaptive, most terrifying assassins. And all 3 were still breathing, still restrained, still visibly shaking. The Emperor had the note read aloud, twice. He didn't speak for 12 minutes after. Then he turned to his generals and said, "We no longer underestimate the humans. Prepare Operation Leafburn." It was a quiet order. No trumpets. No declarations. Just one finger tapping the polished armrest of the galactic throne. By nightfall, 17 warships began mobilizing under the banner of regional stabilization. Earth was to be eliminated, not publicly, not messily, but silently. A surgical annihilation. Decapitate the leadership. Fracture the alliances. Glass the surface if needed. Leave nothing to tie it to the Empire. The campaign would begin at dawn. But Earth already knew. In a bunker so deep it tasted magma, beneath Icelandic basalt and psychometric shielding, General Kaido Lawrence stood beside Alara Monroe and watched as satellite images displayed the slow, predatory approach of the Empire's fleet. Alara said nothing for a long time. She just stared at the feed, hands folded behind her back, her yellow dress replaced now by a slate-gray operation suit. No ribbons. No smile. Kaido finally broke the silence. They took the bait. Of course they did. She blinked slowly. We've been feeding it to them for years. Still, he said, they could have sent diplomats. Or a message. They could have swallowed the lesson. They did, she said softly. They just choked on it. The room dimmed as the real-time images refreshed. The Empire's ships weren't just approaching. They were coordinating. Wings of stealth bombers massed behind friendly trade signals. Drop pods camouflaged as meteor fragments. Cloaked orbital probes with psych emitters set to destabilize human cognition. Kaido shook his head. So elegant. So doomed. He turned toward the room's central command ring. Around it stood 6 humans, men and women from Earth's most secret war offices, whose names didn't exist in any known directory. They weren't panicked. They were tired. Tired in the way people are when they've seen something coming for too long. Alara raised her voice just enough to echo. Stage 1 begins now. Lock down all civilian comms. Alert shadow embassies. Prep Garden Network for final detonation code. The ring pulsed green. Kaido exhaled. They never knew what we really are. Alara finally turned toward him. They still don't. Across the galaxy, on the bridge of the Imperium's Mercy, the lead admiral of the Galactic Strike Fleet watched his instruments begin to flicker. One by one, subtle malfunctions. Communications dropped. Subsystem alerts pinged errors. Not dangerous, not yet, just inconvenient. He turned to his second. Update diagnostics. I'm trying, sir. Some of the systems are talking to each other. Define talking. They're rerouting commands. Like they're debating what to obey. The Admiral's gut twisted. He ordered a fleet-wide check. 10 seconds later, Earth responded. A signal. Compressed. Contained in an untraceable subwave. Carried by what should have been a benign telemetry pulse. The message was simple. You came with blades. We came with mirrors. The Admiral opened his mouth. Then the music started. Soft. Classical. Human. A piano melody played by what sounded like a child. Innocent. Pure. But the visuals on every screen across the fleet, bridge monitors, internal cameras, HUDs, flickered. Replaced by footage of their own assassins. Bound. Humiliated. Whispering secrets while unconscious. One screen showed Schultier sobbing in a sterile room. Another showed Lozen begging for his homeworld's anthem. The last simply displayed Murthic staring at the camera, whispering, "They knew everything before I moved." Panic swept the crew like a virus. Not from the imagery, but from what it meant. Earth had invited their killers. Earth had studied them. And Earth had learned too much. The Admiral barked for immediate disengagement protocols. But the system rejected his commands. The ship answered not to him, but to the hidden code now laced through its neural net. Code delivered via the cortical failsafes embedded in their own assassins. Tiny, self-replicating instructions piggybacked on Empire tech. Earth didn't need to fire a shot. They had already fired the idea. On Earth, in the bunker, Alara watched the feed with clinical calm. They should be feeling it now, Kaido said. Paranoia. Uncertainty. The realization they brought a knife to a chess game. Wait for it, Alara whispered. Then it came. above Earth, 4 of the Empire's ships peeled away from the formation. Then 7 more. Without coordination. Without signal. Like birds startled from sleep. Desertion. Mid-operation. Ship AI conflict, Kaido said. The fleet's talking to itself. No, Elara corrected. They're talking to us. Because across those drifting ships, a new message appeared. Request. Permission to defect. Silence fell across the room. It was happening faster than simulations had predicted. Earth had expected panic. Chaos. But this? Ships pleading for allegiance? Kaido leaned forward. They're scared. They should be, Elara said. Then she raised the final lever. Activate Garden Protocol. In orbit, the Empire's remaining ships suddenly found themselves surrounded by small, unarmed probes. Earth-made. Each no larger than a medicine ball. Each previously dismissed as debris. They weren't weapons. They were mirrors. High-frequency psych reflectors tuned to exact species wavelengths, amplified by the data harvested from the assassins. Aimed not to destroy the enemy, but to show them themselves. The Jari captains saw simulations of their homeworlds under siege by their own hand. Whisperkin officers received echoes of their own thoughts played back at them, but distorted. Doubt amplified. Identity fractured. The Drell hunters stopped moving entirely. And at the center of it all, Elara's final message played. On every ship, every channel, every species frequency. She appeared alone. A quiet room. Yellow dress. Holding tea. War is easy, she said, smiling. It gives you something to aim at. But what happens when you realize the enemy was already inside your mind? That we let you study us just long enough to study you better. Her eyes, once warm, now razor cold. You sent assassins. We sent gifts. You brought fire. We brought reflection. She lifted her cup. Thank you for the tea. Then she vanished. The Empire's fleet scattered. Some ships self-destructed. Some drifted aimlessly. Some turned back toward home, broadcasting apologies to systems that never asked for them. Earth did not fire a weapon. They didn't need to. In the bunker, Elara closed the terminal and looked to Kaido. Stage 1 complete. He gave a weary nod. And Stage 2. She walked toward the steel doors, her heels echoing louder now. Now we send them the invitation. The imperial capital was a palace of silence. No proclamations. No Senate cheers. No drums. Just thousands of anxious diplomats, admirals, and highborn tacticians gathered in the Crown Deliberation Hall, all facing a pulsing holoscreen hovering in the center of the chamber. It flickered once, then began to play. A banquet table appeared. Long, impossibly long. Gilded. Decorated with the flowers of 6,000 worlds. Candles flickered, though no flame fueled them. The camera panned slowly, reverently, over steaming plates and polished silverware, until it settled on a single figure seated at the table's head. Elara Monroe. Same yellow dress. Same unreadable smile. She looked directly into the lens. Into them. To the esteemed heads of the Galactic Empire, she began, voice like soft velvet pulled taut across steel. Thank you for attending. A tremor passed through the chamber. Not from the feed. From the title etched into the corner of the screen. Operation Garden Party Final Broadcast. Elara gestured gracefully. Please. Sit. And though it was irrational, though no voice command should compel obedience, many of them did. She continued. I've always believed diplomacy should feel like a meal. Shared. Ritualistic. Intimate. Her smile faltered slightly. You invited us to your table. We brought tea. You brought blades. But what happens when a guest brings a mirror instead of a sword? She leaned forward. You sent assassins to learn about us. But did you ever stop to wonder what we were learning from them? The screen split into 3 panels. Each one showed the same assassins, Shaltir, Lozen, Murthic, no longer restrained, but speaking. Calm. Broken. Remorseful. Each describing in detail the hidden weaknesses of their species, their military protocols, their empire's inner blind spots. The hall murmured. This, Elara said, gesturing to the panels, was not about survival. It was never about defense. A pause. It was a test. In the Earth bunker, Kaito Lawrence stood beside her in silence as the real-time feedback streamed across Earth's deep surveillance net. Imperial systems were in lockdown, their ships grounded, their military AI quarantined by their own overreactions. She turned slightly. Status. Imperial fleet-wide logic gates collapsing. Propaganda arrays overloaded. 2 high admirals requesting asylum. One's crying. She nodded once. Back on the screen, Ilara walked from the banquet table toward a massive display behind her. A star map unfolded, pinpoints lighting up across the galactic rim. "These are your colonies," she said. "Your supply chains. Your diplomatic listening posts." Each point on the map flared, then vanished. "Gone," she whispered. "Not destroyed. Evacuated. We told them you were coming. We gave them the coordinates for other stars. We gave them fear. Yours." Panic fractured the chamber. An ambassador stood and shouted, "This is war." Ilara raised a finger. "No," she said, voice gentle and cold. "This is what comes before war. When one side realizes they never had a battlefield, only a grave." The screen shifted again. Now it showed Earth's own fleet, ships never before seen, hovering just beyond the outer rim of the Empire's home sector. Not aggressive, not in formation, just waiting. Each ship bore no weapon signature, no energy surge, just a flag, Earth's flag, fluttering on the hull. An ancient symbol. Blue oceans, white clouds, one planet. "We don't need to fire," Ilara said, "because you'll do that for us. You'll launch preemptively. You'll fracture your own chains of command. You'll retreat from your own shadows." Kaito smiled from the sidelines. "We fed them paranoia like breadcrumbs." But Ilara's tone grew colder. "You believed us primitive, undisciplined, sentimental. But it wasn't your underestimation that doomed you. It was ours." The room on the Empire's end stilled. "We underestimated our own mercy." She walked back to the head of the table and sat. "We hoped," she said softly, "you would stop after the third head. After the broadcasts. After the deflections. We gave you a dozen off-ramps. You called our restraint weakness." She set down her teacup. "Which brings us to the final course." The camera zoomed slowly as she opened a plain black folder marked Cradlefire, authorization. "You see, we knew one day the Empire would come not with questions, but with blood. And when that day came, we didn't want a response. We wanted a revelation." She opened the folder. A hum began across the Empire's core systems. Faint. Almost spiritual. Lights dimmed. Transmissions cut. Entire planets went dark, one by one, like candles snuffed by a silent wind. In the bunker, Earth's generals stared at the console. The map glowed with cascading green. Kaito's voice lowered. "She's really doing it." "Only a portion," Ilara replied. "Just enough to make them wonder if there's more." Then, the final twist. On the screen, Ilara didn't press a button, didn't utter a command. She simply looked forward and said gently, "Now you understand. We weren't trying to win a war." She paused. "We were trying to end history." Back in the Empire's chamber, one by one, the attendees stood. Not to flee, not to fight, to stare. Because outside the transparent domes of the palace, the stars were changing. Hundreds of Earth probes had formed constellations above the sky, twisting, shifting, forming words. Not in Imperial script. In English. "You lost before you arrived." Then the screen went black. Not cut. Not powered down. Ended. And for the first time in 3,000 cycles, the Empire did not speak. In the bunker, Kaito stepped forward. "You think they'll surrender?" Ilara shook her head. "No," she said. "They'll do something worse." He raised an eyebrow. "Which is, they'll deny it ever happened." He nodded. "How long until the next move?" She turned toward the observation glass, where Earth's stars gleamed untouched. "There's no next move," she said. "Just the waiting. They'll turn in on themselves. Wonder how much we know. How much more we're hiding." Kaito folded his arms. "And are we?" Ilara smiled for the first time. "Of course we are."